Okay, so the last thing I do before we move on is just take one final pass and just look and see if there's anything I want to move around before we go any farther. Alright, so up on the end here, I might just rotate this one just slightly. Okay, so I'm just going to go to rotate, turn off the angle snaps, and just give this a tiny bit of a rotation. Very, very slight, and we'll just move it out so they're not interpenetrating. Okay, just like that maybe. Alright, this little one in the middle, I might move it a little bit too on an angle. And we got to keep in mind that, you know, obviously if this was a real tower, that water tank that's sitting up here is going to weigh, you know, a ton, and it's going to be so heavy on these so they're not really going to be able to move around at all, but I might just slightly move it. Just don't want to go too extreme, else it's going to look a little bit fake. Alright, so just a slight bit. Alright, maybe the end here. These ones wouldn't really be pinned underneath it, so they might be able to move a little more than the rest, so just give this one a slight bit of a turn too. Alright, and just make sure the ends aren't sticking into each other. Alright, so that's probably good for the deck. Just going to look and see if there's anything else that stands out. Alright, this one on the inside here might be a little too high. Okay, so I'm going to select that one, it's on the left side, and just go to move, make sure you're on local here, and just push it down just a bit so it's not so high up. Alright, just check the ends, make sure everything's still clearing. Okay, looks good. Alright, this one on this side I might just leave. Okay, so I think that's all I'll do, and we're finally done the wooden part at last, so we'll move on and maybe detail the blocks down here, and then we'll add the pipe and the tank and roof, and then we'll be finally done. So let's just save now that we have those tweaks made. So let's do the blocks now. Okay, so I'm just going to grab this front right corner one. Okay, and I might actually add another loop around here. Alright, so I'm just going to go back to edge and just grab, actually let's do this in the front view. Alright, just zoom in here. Alright, I'm just going to drag through the sides of the bevel. Alright, these guys here. And we'll just do a connect and just add one more edge in there, and then we'll go through the sides and just add another one. Okay, just to make sure we have enough resolution to give us a decent result. Okay, so let's turn that off, turn our paint to form back on. Alright, take the brush down, maybe around 6 or 7, and take the amount way down. Push, pull down. And obviously we do want these to look like concrete, so that they're not going to warp that much, you know, nowhere near as much as the wood, so we'll just kind of quickly change the shape of this a bit, just to break up the straight edges, but we don't want to overdo it. And maybe push this down just a little bit. I'm just going to shrink the brush down a bit. Let's take the intensity up a slight bit. You just want to be careful you don't plow in the top here too much, because obviously this would be supporting the entire weight of the tower, so we don't want to have a big void of empty space in there. Alright, just make sure I get all the sides. Bottom corner a bit. Alright, that's probably even fine. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one here. I'm just going to do the same thing quickly. Jump into the front view and just add a couple more edges. Okay, so let's go through the top. Just want to do one. Okay, and same thing here, just one. And we'll quickly hit it with the brush. Alright, let's exit edge first. Take this down a little bit more. Alright, just work our way around, make sure we kind of hit every side a little bit. Alright, jump out, just take a look. Turn the edges off. Alright, that's probably fine for those two. If you want to save a little extra time, you could just clone one of these over. But I might do that actually, just to save some more time. So let's grab this front one, and just shift drag a copy over here. We'll say OK, and then just align it to the blank one that we have here. Alright, XYZ, pivot point, say OK, and then we'll dump the plain one. And I'm just going to paint on this quickly just to change up the shape. You can do this in isolation mode, probably be a little easier. Let's just take that down a bit maybe. Alright, let's exit. Turn our brush off. Alright, jump out here just to see if that looks okay. Alright, not too bad. Okay, so let's just clone this one, the front right corner one, over to the left front corner. Alright, so copy, and we could flip this around. Alright, I might just spin it 180. Alright, and just align it to the blank one. And get rid of that blank one. Alright, and we'll just quickly warp it. Take the brush size down a little bit. Alright. So pretty good. We do want it to be subtle, so I'm not going to totally hammer it, but I think that's cool for those guys. So let's do a save, and we'll move on and put the pipe in next. Okay, so let's chuck the pipe in. And it's really simple, it's just a cylinder, so it'll only take a few minutes to do. One thing I'm going to do first, though, is I'm not really loving the way this little tiny board in the center looks. I don't think it's really working. It just doesn't look like it matches the rest of them. Right, I think I just went a little too small with it, so I'm going to replace it. If yours doesn't look wrong, then there's no reason to fix it. But I'm going to delete this one and just replace it quickly. Okay, maybe with a copy of the one that's second to the back there. Alright, so I'm going to shift drag it over into its spot, do a copy, and then let's actually just rotate it. Alright, so I'm going to turn the angle snaps on and just flip it 180 from top to bottom, and we'll do it lengthwise as well. And just push it down into place so it's sitting on the beam. Alright, just like that, and let's actually move it back maybe a little bit on the Y. A little more maybe, okay. And I might just slightly turn it like we did the original one. Just a tiny bit. Okay, so that looks a little more uniform. Doesn't really stick out now. Alright, so we'll just throw the pipe in here. So let's go into the top view. Alright, hit Z to center the model, and I'm just going to go back to the create panel and just grab a cylinder and drag it out kind of centered on that board we just replaced. Alright, so give it some radius, some height. Jump out into the front view and just move it down so it's sitting where our ground plane would be. Alright, down here so it's level with the bottom of our foot pads. Okay, and we'll just up the height here in the modify panel until it gets up to the deck. Alright, we'll just say 90, that's probably fine. Might be a little too fat though, so let's check it out in perspective. Yeah, it's too wide, so let's take this down, maybe let's do 5 or maybe 5.5. That looks about right. Okay, and obviously it's not correct here because the pipe's completely blocked by the deck board up there, and it's not going to be able to actually go into the tank. And I didn't bother putting a hole in there for that, just to save some time, because I don't think it's really necessary in this case. It's going to be completely blocked by the bottom of the tank there, and even if you did a render from down here, these beams underneath are really going to block your view of that upper part there, so you're probably really not going to notice if it goes through or not. So yeah, I just decided to leave it out, but you could add that detail if you want to. Alright, one thing we do want to do though is just make sure that it's not sticking into the beams here underneath, so I'm just going to move it over in the front view so it's kind of between these two. Alright, and let's check it out in the left view, make sure it's centered. Alright, it's not, so we'll move it over a bit. Alright, I'm just going to center it maybe on the center of these crossboards here. Alright, take one quick look. Alright, so that's probably cool. Let's go into isolation mode, Alt Q. And we do want to have the ability to warp the pipe slightly just so it matches the condition of the rest of the tower. So let's add some resolution to it. Alright, I'm just going to take the height segments up a bit. Alright, maybe 10, or we can probably do 15 even. Okay, and we'll just take the sides up as well, just so it's nice and smooth. Okay, so we'll do 15 height segments and 30 sides, that should be enough. And let's convert it to Headwell Poly. Change the color here. Okay, and we'll just go to Polygon and get rid of the top one. Delete it, and the bottom one, because you're never going to see those. Okay, and we'll just start roughing it up with the paint to form again. So let's turn our brush back on, take our sizes down. I'm going to keep the amount really low on this as well, just because it's just, you know, it would be metal and it's not going to totally warp. It might warp slightly as it starts to rust out, but we don't want to go too crazy. So we'll keep it low and just kind of keep the effects subtle. Alright, turn our edges off maybe. Alright, one thing we could do to help when we're doing this is just make another material quickly. I'm just going to open up the material editor with M, grab a new material, and just make one that has a lot more of a specular highlight. Alright, so we'll take the specular up pretty high. Let's put this actually on the pipe. Alright, I'm going to take the glossiness up a little bit. Alright, take the specular way up. Alright, just so we get kind of a highlight. Don't do that. Take this down a little bit. It's a little too crazy. Alright. And sometimes it helps to do that because you get a better idea of where the bumps are. Alright, so I'm just going to quickly hit it. Again, just randomly pressing Alt. Just going to lower this down a little bit, it's still too intense. Take the glossiness down a little bit. And again, I'm really just paying attention to the silhouette of it. Just trying to break up the straight lines. Alright, turn the edges back on maybe. Alright, just going to lower the brush size slightly. Alright, let's exit isolation mode, just see how it looks with the rest of the tower there. Okay, that's probably fine. We don't need to worry about it too much, so I'm just going to put the default material back on. Alright, take one last look. Alright, I think that's okay, so let's turn the brush off here. And we'll just do a save and move on and do the tank. So let's go back to the create panel, just grab another cylinder. I'm just going to jump into the top view. Okay, and we'll just drag one out here again, kind of center it on the center board. Alright, just give it some radius and give it some height, and we'll just tweak that in a second. Let's actually move it up in the front view so it's sitting on top of the deck. Alright, just up here, top of the boards. Okay, let's jump out. Alright, so let's take a look at our reference. That might help. Alright, so in the modify panel, I'm just going to take the radius down a little bit. I think it's a little too big. Alright, we'll go maybe around 35 or 36. Let's try 35. Alright, let's move it over so it's kind of centered as well. Okay, so we'll say 35, and the height, let's just take that up a bit. We want it to be somewhat tall. Check it out. Okay, that's close. Let's just say 70 to make it easy. Alright, just going to change the color here quickly. Alright, we can throw that specular material on there, I guess. Alright, so we're going to warp this as well. So I think 15 is probably okay for the height segments. This is actually up the sides, though. We want this thing to be, somewhat smooth when we turn our edges off. Alright, so I'm just going to take it up to like 50. Okay, fairly high. But that'll give us, some decent resolution to sculpt on. Alright, so we'll say that's cool, and let's convert it to poly. Alright, so the first thing I do is just dump the top cap. We don't need that. Keep the bottom one. Just going to go in isolation mode here too. Alt Q. Alright, so we'll go around to the bottom and just select that face. And let's control click edge. Alright, we're just going to round the edge over slightly. So let's chamfer that down. Take it down a bit. Doesn't need to be a lot. Maybe a little less. Let's do maybe like 0.4 and then we'll say apply and just do a double here. Lower the second amount down. Okay, maybe 0.15 or 1.6 should be fine. Okay. So we'll exit edge for a second. Let's exit isolation mode too. Alright, so I think that's okay. Let's take a look here. Alright, so we have the two ridges that run around it. Alright, so let's jump into the front view. Alright, select the tank. And we have 15 height segments, so just to make sure everything's even, I'm just going to go down 5 polygons and maybe 5 from the bottom. Okay, so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, select that bottom edge, and then we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, select the top edge. Okay, that way we'll know that we have even spacing here, and they're going to be centered. Alright, so we have 5 above, 5 in the middle, and 5 at the bottom. Okay, and then we'll just do a loop. Alright, just like that. Let's do this in perspective. Alright, so to create the little ridge, I'm just going to chamfer this a bit. Alright, and let's do it maybe 0.75. I'm just actually going to change the material here so we can see it a little easier. Put the normal one back on. Okay, so we'll say 0.75 and okay, and then let's zoom in here and just grab one of those little tiny edges in between our new loops, and we'll do a ring, control click polygon. Alright, just to get the poly selection, and I'm going to jump out and actually do this in the front view. Alright, just so I can see the profile of it. And we'll just bevel these to create the little ridge detail. Okay, so bevel, do this on local normal. Okay, and we'll take the height way down. Let's up the outline amount, untwist them. Alright, take this down a little bit. Let's check it out in perspective just to make sure that's going to be okay. Alright, that looks pretty good, so we'll just do 0.35 on the height and negative 0.45 on the outline amount, and say okay. Alright, let's just turn off polygon for a sec, and just take a quick look here. Try to make sure the size is about right. Looks good. Okay, so let's chamfer these edges down. Alright, so I'm just going to grab maybe the top and bottom ones on each of the ridges, and we'll do a loop and chamfer. Alright, we'll keep these ones fairly tight, maybe like 0.1, and we'll say okay, and then we'll grab the two outer ones, holding control on each of the ridges, and loop, and chamfer again. Alright, might take these up a little bit, maybe like 0.12, and say okay. Alright, so let's just check it out. See if that looks about right. I think this size is good. Okay, so we'll just warp it quickly. Alright, maybe we should save first though before we do that, just in case we want to go back. Alright, so we'll save another copy. Alright, so let's chuck the specular material on the tank. And we can do this in probably isolation mode to make it a little easier to see, so I'm just going to select the tank and then Alt Q. Okay, and let's turn our brush on. Alright, I'm going to lower the size down a bit. We'll use one that's maybe around maybe 12 or 13. Okay, and take the push pull down. Take the amount way down to like 0.02 or so. Okay, we'll just slightly warp it like we did the pipe. We just want to be careful here of the ridges, because we have so many edges close together that if we really hammer this down, we're going to probably start to get the crossing verts again, and I don't want to have a problem later on, so I'm going to try to avoid really hammering those ridges if I can. Okay, so we'll just kind of work around them. It's okay to hit them a little bit if you want to, but just make sure your amount's probably like 0.01. Alright, so it doesn't do too much damage. Alright, so just go in. Alright, slightly warp the surface. pressing Alt here and just randomly hitting it. You can bulge it out in some spots, but you don't want to pull it out too much, else it's not going to really look right. Alright, and same deal down here on the bottom, these edges here. I just want to be careful I don't totally hit them. Alright, this isn't doing much, so I'm just going to up the intensity a little bit. Alright, turn the edges back on for a sec. And I definitely prefer to do it with the edges on, just because I find it easier to tell what it's actually doing. But that's up to you. It's all personal preference. Let's lower the brush size down a little bit. Let's turn these off. Alright, so we're getting some warping there. This specular material I made isn't fantastic, definitely could be a little better, but it's helping a little bit to see where the bulges are. Alright, so just continue around until you get pretty much the whole thing somewhat detailed. Alright, just going to go spin around it, just make sure I didn't pull anything out or push anything in too far. But I think that looks good. I don't want to totally overdo it. Okay, so for the ridges there, I'm just going to lower the amount way down to like 0.01 and maybe just hit them slightly in a few places. I'm just going to rough them up a little bit because when we render it, we'll probably get a highlight along here, and we don't want it to be too smooth, else it's not really going to match the highlight that we have on the tank. So just rough it up a little bit. Alright, just going to make sure I'm not crossing anything here. Alright, so just quickly, just random places. Alright, randomly pressing Alt and sometimes not. Alright, it's a little hard to tell because we have some rough looking faces here. We don't have any smoothing groups or anything on this yet, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. Okay, so that's probably cool for the tank. Let's turn off the brush and just exit and just take a look here. Alright, just going to throw the default material back on. Alright, just quickly check it. Alright, let's also make sure it's sitting in the right place here. Looks pretty good. So make sure it's not sticking into the boards too much. Alright, that looks right, so I think that'll do it for the tank, and we'll move on to the roof. Let's just do a save now that it's done.